Hey up, Paul O'Neill here. If you're wondering what this is all about, let me just quickly explain. I'm going to do a little pilot show, review type preview kind of thing. Speaking to a friend of mine, Chris, and we were just chatting and saying it's a shame that we can't on ITV when we're live as pundits. Me and Tim Harvey and Steve Ryder are chatting. We can't really go on too long because there's not enough time in the end of the show for us to really say what we think about different things that have happened in the racing. So we thought we'd just do a little preview show, and that's nobody's fault. It's not ITV's fault. It's not British Touring Car's fault. Basically, loads of racing goes on, and at the very end of the show, there can only be sometimes 2 minutes left or 1.5 minutes left, we get told in our ears. And we need to be off air, so it's a bit of a shame. And we get people saying, oh, why didn't you mention this and why didn't you mention that? It's a difficult one because you'd rather see the racing than see someone talk about what they've seen, wouldn't you? So I just thought, with me and Chris, we had a chat and we said, let's have a little chat about certain things that have happened in races gone by, and also the races that are coming up. So that's why. So it's a pilot. I hope you like it. Tell us what you think. We can maybe do it again and see what happens with it. But anyway, we've had 2 rounds gone. We've had Donington Park go, and Brands Hatch GP, hot Brands Hatch GP. But also we've had a lot of things happen in the races and a lot of different people doing interesting things. So let's have a chat about some of those things and some of those people. The first round at Donington was pretty amazing, wasn't it? I thought it was a pretty cool race. Ash Sutton, woo! In the Infiniti, with Laser Tools Racing and BMR Engineering. His little team working wonders. Unbelievable. I was pleasantly surprised by that. Ash is, I've always said this, he's up there with Colin Turkington as, in my eyes, one of the best all-round touring car drivers in the whole of the world. He is amazing. And for him to do what he's done in that Infiniti, I think is astounding. Set it up perfectly with his team and BMR Engineering, and they've really made that car go very well, haven't they? And we've seen that at Donington. I think a couple of things to take from that car is the fact that it doesn't seem to qualify brilliantly, even though at Donington it looked very fast in qualifying, but in race trim it is silly fast. It's amazingly fast, and one of the reasons for that, from when I look at a racing car or a British touring car in particular, with it being rear wheel drive, is obviously a great thing for traction, but it's got such an amazing lot of traction in slow speed corners, but also it can turn real quick, and it seems to be all about how fast he can get on the throttle in the corners. It's nothing about straight line speed. I think the car is, well, I still think the BMW is probably a really fast car in a straight line. You've seen that when the Infiniti goes against one of the 3 Series, it kind of, they're the same until it gets to a certain speed, and maybe the BMW's got a better drag coefficient. It just seems to pull away, and it might be engine as well, but it just seems to edge away when it gets to a certain velocity, the BMW. So the Infiniti is definitely fast in a straight line, but it's not, by no means, it's not the fastest thing in the world. I think a lot of their speed does come down to mid-corner speed and slow speed traction when they're getting back on the power in slower corners. And Ash is driving it just perfectly, and it's amazing to see. I'm so glad. 1 championship Ash has won. He's got 1 million championships in him, I think. And it's just good to see him now in a car that I can watch him, and I just know it's a great car, but it's level with everybody else, because that Subaru, watching him drive that, looked, oh my word, he could only really win if it was wet, with how the platform worked and how the weight was in the car. It was a great car rules wise for them, but it didn't have a lot of straight line speed at all, so I always worried about him. But if they did have the same power as everybody else, and it's been mentioned before, that Subaru would have just been up the road. So it was just how the rules worked. But Ash did seem to spend a lot of time defending on straights and then just eating people up at apexes. So I'm glad he's in a car that now nobody can complain about. I think shouldn't be complaining about that car. It is what it is. It's a great car that those guys have put together. So good to see Ash up there. I think he will be... he'll be amazing for the rest of the year. Definitely in race trim he's going to be amazing, but he needs to they need to work on that qualifying a bit. It wasn't brilliant at Brands Hatch. It did seem to be a bit all over the place, but they will sort that out. I'm sure they will. So good stuff from Ash. Colin Turkington. Don't be too perturbed by Colin Turkington. He's just doing his job. He's driving, you know, the 4 times champion. He knows what he's doing. He's just going out there doing what he knows he needs to do, picking up the points. He's 16 points ahead of Ash in the Drivers' Championship. Some people I've heard going, oh, it's boring, that thing's just driving off up the road. It's not his fault. Everybody's having failures and crashing and having a nightmare race. He's just bringing the points home and doing the business. So Colin's just doing what he's doing, and 16 points in British touring car terms, everybody will tell you, and I'm sure a lot of you know, is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. You've seen what happens at the end of the year. It's like swings and roundabouts. It's just unreal. So I would not worry about the dominance of Colin Turkington, BMW and West Surrey Racing, because it isn't dominant in my eyes. They're just doing the job that they know they can do and what they need to do. So don't worry about that. There's a lot of guys out there, including Ash Sutton, Ingram, Camish, maybe Tom Oliphant, that will give him a good run for his money, definitely. Yeah, so we'll see about that. Let's talk about Rory Butcher. Rory Butcher in that Focus ST, the Motorbase Focus ST. Unreal. I mean, that car looks so good. The front end on that car, when he goes to get into the apexes of corners, slow speed, medium speed, high speed, the car just looks phenomenal. Motorbase have done a mega job with that ST, and the Mount Tune engine always been strong. They don't need to worry about what engine goes in that car. They needed to sort the chassis out on this new Focus, and have they done that? Yes, they have. It's one of the best chassis out there, no doubt. Rory Butcher, one of the biggest pros, one of the nicest lads, one of the best drivers. We are very privileged in British touring cars to see these guys coming through, so I'm so happy that Rory's up there. Punchers, difficult one. Maybe they needed that to happen at Brands Hatch to show them where the limit was of the tyre. The first one, from what I've heard, was a stone or a cut. The second one could have been the same, but from a person who's watching it, I'm thinking, left front punchers. I think maybe Jackson had one as well, so sometimes you get the geometry right on the limit, and it was a hot day, and the way those Focuses were hitting the curb on the inside at paddock, because the chassis was so good they could take loads of curb. I think it then puts a lot of pressure on the other side as the car bounces and skips down the hill into the compression at Paddock Hill Bend. I'm not an engineer. That's just something I'm thinking, is that what happened? But there is no doubt that Rory, Motorbase, and his teammate Ollie Jackson are in for a wicked year, and I'm so glad to see that, because those guys work hard, and they've put Rory in the car to win championships and win races and do the business, and he's going to do that, I think. I can't wait to see how he gets on. It'd be cool. So yes, that's my my little thoughts on Rory. He's definitely one to watch. He could have been on pole at Donington, and he did a mega job at Brands Hatch, didn't he? It was such a shame. I was gutted when his car had the problems. Ollie Jackson, his teammate, I had him as my driver of the day, and a few people were like, "Oh, driver of the day, really?" Honestly, Rory Butcher is one of the best out there, and Ollie Jackson, for me, was just as good as him. Had a great weekend. He's always gone well at Brands Hatch GP. I remember he outdrove Chilton, his teammate from last year, all the way through the Grand Prix weekend at Brands Hatch, and I wasn't surprised to see him up there. And he didn't put a foot wrong. I know he had a failure. He didn't put a foot wrong, and when he had weight in the car for the second race, it took Butcher a while. He got past everybody, Butcher, and then he got to Ollie, and he genuinely, Ollie just didn't put a foot wrong, and he had more weight in the car than Rory. And again, he was faster than him on lap times. I know Rory had to come through traffic, but still, Jackson was fast, man. I was very impressed by Ollie Jackson, and he's lost the weight. He talks well. I was made up for him with the podium at Brands, and I really think he's going to go very, very well for the rest of the year, and I hope he does. Great guy, spot on. Got a good little team there, haven't they? It's really, really cool. They just need Andy Neat now if he can just get to grips with the car and go forward, but he hasn't driven a touring car for quite a while, so we'll see how he gets on. But Jackson, definitely, he was very good. Tom Oliphant. Let's talk about Tom. Had a nice steady Donington, I thought at the beginning, and then got right in there, got the podium, chipped away. You know, having Colin Turkington as your teammate ain't easy. Probably one of the most difficult teammates you could ever imagine having, except for Ash Sutton. You're always a bit like, oh, really? Oh. But you can learn off people like that. You can sink or swim. And I think Tom is clever enough to know he just needs to watch and learn, and that is what he's been doing. And this is a strong start to the season. He's in third position, 70 points. He's only 25 off Colin, and I think that's an amazing effort. I know he's only 2 rounds gone, but fair play to him. So yeah, he's looking good. And to get his first win at Brands Hatch, I thought was amazing. He's a lovely guy. He's got a great family. Jen, his girlfriend's a top girl. They're really all supportive of each other, and I don't think anybody... It was really nice to see how all the drivers on Twitter were made up for Tom. They were genuinely made up for him, and everyone was sending him lovely messages. Ash Sutton, who he defended from, sent him a great message. I tell you what, you do not want... I will tell you firsthand, you do not want Colin Turkington, Tom Ingram, Ash Sutton, or any of those guys, Dan Camish, Josh Cook, any of those kind of guys up the front. You don't want them behind you when you're trying to get your first win. And Ash Sutton looked to me like he had the faster car, and Tom was textbook. He was amazing. So that was a great first win. It was a long time coming. He should have had one at Silverstone last year, but I made up for him. So Tom, you did a good job, mate. I thought that was really, really cool. Might be a bit upset he didn't get driver of the weekend off me, but I was put on the hop and I wouldn't change my mind. I thought Ollie Jackson was excellent at Brands Hatch. So yeah, well done though, Tom. You were spot on. Let's talk about Hyundais, because was I surprised that they're amazingly fast? Actually, no. Those cars are so good. So good. Well put together. Kevin Berry, my old race engineer, has got a lot to do with those cars. I think he's a fantastic guy. Justina and Anthony Williams own the team. They kind of let the guys get on with it. Marvin Humphreys, my old team boss, is there. Sandra Humphreys, who owned the race team with Marvin that I drove for. They know exactly what they're doing, and Marvin Humphreys has had a really, really big input into this operation, and he's doing a fantastic job. Senna and Smiley are good drivers, and they're doing a great job as well. And I think that is going to start really coming together. And Oulton coming up, it'll be interesting for that car, I think. And people are going to want to drive that car next year if there's a seat there. If those two guys aren't there, or one of them isn't there, people are going to be looking at that car because it's got massive potential. And those guys driving it at the minute are doing a great job. So it's good to see. Podium on their debut. You imagine what that's like for Accelerate, who've been in MGs at the back of the field, not been able to get the car going well because it's an old chassis. A lot of work's gone in there, so fair play to Accelerate, Marvin, Sandra and Kev Berry and all the other guys that have worked on the car. Fair play to you. That was a real good start to the year. So yes, Hyundais, I do like the look of them. It's good to see a new car on the grid, isn't it? What about the Honda failures? What's going on? What is going on? Dan Camish. We need Dan Camish up there. I mean, Brands Hatch, what a disaster for the lad. An absolute disaster. I couldn't believe it. Power steering fuse popped out in one of the races. That's why you've seen him run wide at Surtees, going onto the Grand Prix straight. And then it kind of got going again, and then it was a bit of a nightmare for him. Total disaster, ruined his race. And then the engine blew, I think, in race 3. And I think Dan is now, for me, the complete touring car driver. He knows, I mean, how close did he come to winning that title with Colin Turkington? And I think that he's took that ever so well. There's a lot of people that would sink after that and think, will I ever get to win the championship ever again after being so close? Dan will win one, definitely. One of the best drivers out there. And he's going to come to the fore very, very soon. Back up to the fore, I should say, not because he has been there. So yeah, I'm hoping that the Hondas can, get a bit more control over their attrition rate at the minute. It's not brilliant, isn't it? Matt Neal didn't really feature at Brands Hatch. He'll bounce back as well. But yeah, the BTC cars, Cook, Chilton, they're fast drivers. They're definitely going to be there. I think it just takes a while, for it maybe to pan out for them. They've got different engines than or the different inlets that may be making a difference compared to the Halfords Hondas. So they both have the Neil Brown engines. So it is interesting to see the dynamic of what's going on there. So hopefully we can see all the Hondas having a good run up there, and Cook and Chilton especially are two of the best drivers on the grid, so, and the fastest as well. So let's see what happens with them. Let me just quickly talk about Crees. He's had 3 Jack Sears wins. When I spoke to him earlier on in the year, because we chatted about where to go team wise, and I said, have a look at trying to get yourself in an FK8 Honda. He's done that. I think he's fitted in brilliantly. He's a great guy. Had a good season last year, under the radar. Now he's come into a team that are up the front and have won a lot of races, nearly won the championship with Josh. Learning off Chilton and Josh, actually giving Chilton a good run for his money, to be fair, in the first weekend, and then had a mega lap time at Brands Hatch GP for his qualifying lap, but it took off him with track limits, so that's just the way it goes. But he's now starting to learn the trade of touring cars, and he's won 3 Jack Sears trophies, and he's leading the Jack Sears trophy as well. So I know that's the thing he's desperate to win this year, and if he wins that, I will be the first person made up for him, because he's come on leaps and bounds, and he's hard not to like, isn't he? So difficult weekend for him at Brands Hatch GP, as it's been well documented. His family having a bit of trouble, private matter, but yeah, he opted to race on when he spoke to his wife Jodie. So yeah, fair play to those guys. I know they were going through, I couldn't even imagine what they were going through with the miscarriage of a baby of theirs. So absolutely horrendous. It's in the press, so I can say it. Yeah, he spoke to Jodie, his wife, and apparently she said she'd love him to just get his head down and keep racing, because with COVID you can't, there's restrictions in hospitals and things like that. So yeah, I couldn't imagine what that was like for him that weekend. And he had an accident, didn't he, with Bobby Thompson as well. And I knew nothing about this as a person, so it was pretty awful. But I've spoken to him since and sent him my best. So yeah, but he's doing a great job, and hopefully he can carry that on to Oulton Park as well. Let's talk about Nick Hamilton. What a lad. I'm actually made up for Nick, because he had a really horrible Donington Park, didn't he? Ended up in the gravel a couple of times, pushing on, trying hard. And I spoke to, if you haven't seen it on Pitch BTCC, you've got to see the Insta Live I did with Nick Hamilton. It was one of the most open and amazing things that I've ever had to do, press-wise or media-wise. Some of the stuff he told me was absolutely amazing. The lad's got cerebral palsy. We all know, can hardly walk. He's got hand controls in the CC that he drives for Team Hard. He's a proper guy, I've got so much respect for him, and I won't have no one say a bad word against that lad, because I know how hard it is to drive a touring car, and I'll guarantee if you put me, I don't know, Tim Harvey, someone else who's not drive, maybe, I don't know, Matt Jackson, someone like that who's, driven a touring car but hasn't got much experience now of the newer cars. If you put us in his car, or a CC Passat, a Team Hard car, we would struggle to get to the pace that he is at. He's not a million miles off the back. He's actually quite close to his teammates. And Ollie Brown, Ollie Brown is in Team Hard. I know Ollie really well, and he's one of the most talented drivers that I've ever seen. So I know how good Jack Goff and Ollie Brown are, his teammates, and we need to give Nick Hamilton a bit more respect than he actually gets, because that guy, I just don't know how he drives with his condition. It's amazing. The guy's an absolute inspiration, so I will not have anybody say a bad word against that lad. He's spot on. I sent him a message to say well done, because he got his first point of the year at Brands Hatch. And he was really happy that we messaged and congratulated him, so fair play to him. All the guys, the new kids, everyone's got points now. All the touring car drivers on the grid. Every driver in the championship's got points, so that's good. So yeah, it was a nice little round at Brands, wasn't it? Everybody getting off the mark who hadn't had points before. So yeah, I was really pleased with that. But yes, I think that, talking of CCs and team hard, Jack Goff, absolutely devastated for that lad. Again, I spoke with him on pitch BTCC. We had a chat on Insta Live, and I know how hard he works, because I know Jack pretty well. To get the money to go racing, it's astounding how hard you have to work. But he works so hard and tirelessly, and I was made up when he had that reverse grid at Brands Hatch, and it just fell apart for him. He didn't even get to Graham Hill Bend, and he got involved in someone else's accident. I was devastated for him. He needs some luck, because he didn't have any luck at Donington, did he, when his brakes failed at the top of McLean's, and I've been off there with brake failure. It's not nice when you hit the brakes in 6th gear and the pedal goes to the floor, and it feels like the car speeds up and your body comes out of the seat, because it feels like you've just sped up. It's horrible. So, fair play to Team Hard, got the car back out for Donington. But yeah, they deserve more from that reverse grid, and I just know how hard he works. And yeah, I think we'll see a bit more. They need to take opportunities when it's raining and reverse grids, that kind of stuff, and he needed a result out of that. So it was a real shame that he didn't get it. Another driver that I think it's worth talking about just quickly, James Gornall. So impressed with James. I knew he'd be fast, because I've driven in Mini Challenge a few years ago, and that's where James has come from. He's the champion of last year's Mini Challenge. Absolute top guy. Bobby Thompson, his teammate, he's a very, very, very fast peddler, and he has kept him so honest, so honest. And they've been battling hard and fair as well. I've seen them side by side in some fast corners in these last 2 rounds at Donington and Brands. And yeah, I know how hard that Mini Challenge is. I had a couple of races in it, and James rang me after I'd done it and said, should I look at it, what they like? I've never driven front wheel drive. So he went straight into it, was right up the front, and then he went, he did a couple of guest rounds, and then the year after, last year, he went and won the championship in his family-run team, I believe, with his dad. So I know how good James is, and there's more to come from James. If he gets a reverse grid, he's going to be one to watch, and yeah, that's going to be an interesting dynamic. But Trade Price Cars they're a good team, aren't they, in the A3? I like them. They seem to get the job done, so fair play to them. Yeah, so we've spoke about mostly everything here. One thing I will talk about is Jake Hill. That's one of my massive disappointments of the year, is Jake getting into an FK2 Honda, which I was so happy for him for. We spoke again on Pitch BTCC, and probably one of the best interviews, except for Nicholas Hamilton, that I've done, where Jake was so honest, and we spoke about the hardship and the trouble that racing maybe has caused his family, where you can have fallouts because they haven't got a lot of money. They've actually got hardly any money. Probably out of everyone in British touring cars, Simon Hill, his dad, has put everything with the family, and his mum and his sister, and they've put so much time and effort and money into where he is now. It must be so frustrating to have the failures in the engine department that he's had. I couldn't imagine. But please, if you do get to have a look at Pitch BTCC, have a look at that, because he told me some stories I didn't even know about racing. So it was very, very interesting. Very interesting. Do you know what I'd love with Jake's, I don't even know, I think he's only on 6 points. He's nowhere in the championship, absolutely nowhere in the championship with the failures he's had with the Swindon power plant. He just had one after the other. So I don't know what's gone on there, and I don't know if it's a problem with the drivetrain or the Swindon engine or whatever it is. It's caused him grief, and I can feel his frustration, and he doesn't deserve it, because he's one of the best drivers on the grid, and this is his chance. And I still think that he had the title in his head, and so he should have, because he's good enough for it. But I think now he can just go for the wins outright, and that's where Turkington, Sutton, Ingram, Camish, those guys need to be careful, because Jake is going to have no weight. He's going to be up with them, and he ain't going to be taking no prisoners. So watch out for him, I reckon, at Oulton. He's going to be a good one. Little bit of late news that come on board, I think it was yesterday. Mike Bushell's gone to PMR, Powermax Racing, so they lost Plato and Jackson because of the COVID, but they're going to get the cars out as much as they can. I think Mike Bushell is out for the rest of the year, so he's going to do the last 7 rounds. Mike Bushell, one of the nicest lads again. He is a very switched on, clever kid. One of the better driver engineers that I know. Reminds me a bit of, and this sounds well outlandish, Andy Rouse could engineer a car like an engineer, and Andy Rouse drove the car to championships. It's amazing putting him in the same bracket as Mike Bushell, but Mike is a fantastic driver, a very, very good driver, and a brilliant engineer. So, and he's not arrogant with it, so, you know, he'll have an engineer himself, but they'll work together amazingly. Be interesting to see what they can do with that Astra, because that was a good car at the end of the year in the hands of Jason Plato. So watch out for Mike Bushell. But me, for one, I'm really happy to see Mike back, because he's had a lot of health issues, which stopped him from starting the season with Team Hard. So maybe things happen for a reason, and maybe he can get himself right up amongst the guys in the PMR car. So Adam Weaver will be made up. Spoke to Adam the other day about drivers and who he could put in the car, but Mike Bushell, I'm really happy about that, him being there. So that's all good. Okay, so as we look ahead to Oulton Park, what should we expect? I think we should expect rain. I think it's going to absolutely wee it down. If it's dry, you've got to remember there's the top 3 in the championship: Colin, Ash, Tom, Oliphant, all rear-wheel drive cars. We go to Oulton. I still think that is a rear-wheel drive circuit. Quite a lot of slow traction zones where the BMW, the Infiniti, and the 1 Series BMW as well will maybe come to the fore. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they get on. If it's wet, the front wheel drive cars will have, I think, more of an opportunity to get right amongst them. But I still think if it's wet, Ash Sutton, that car in the wet, and Ash Sutton's wet weather driving, I just think he could have an absolutely monstrous weekend and come away with the lead of the championship. So I might be shooting myself in the foot here, but Ash Sutton, wet, Laser Tools Racing, BMR Engineering, Infiniti, I think they could have an absolute monster of a weekend if that's the case, because they were very quick in the tyre test at Snetterton in the rain. So that's what I'm looking for from Ash Sutton. If it is dry, I think Ash will be up there anyway, obviously, but maybe not in qualifying. I think that in qualifying I would be looking at, I don't think maybe Colin with all the weight on, because it's a real stop-start place, Oulton. I think maybe it might even be a front-wheel drive car at the front for qualifying. A Camish, I would say. Tom Ingram would probably be a good bet. But I think Matt Neal with 6 kilos on, and I believe he's 10th, I think, in the championship. Matt Neal with 10 kilos on in the FK8 Honda, I think, would be right in the mix. This could be the start of his year. But also, look out for Stephen Jelly, 24 kilos, and he'd be the lightest rear-wheel drive car. He's had a good start to the year. He's been up the front. So I would look out for him. I think that'll be the way to go. But we've got... What have we got? So we've got Oulton, rear-wheel drive for me, track. And then we've got Knockhill, rear-wheel drive, track again. So I think what a lot of the front-wheel drive guys need to do, Dan Camish and all that, is they've just got to be right up the front, because if the rear-wheel drive cars now start to score maximum points at Oulton and Knockhill coming up, I think it could be a real psychological nightmare for them. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rear-wheel drive cars go about it, and see how they score. So yeah, I hope all of that made sense. That was nearly 30 minutes. As I say, it was just a pilot. I thought we'll give it a go and see what you all think of it. But yeah, hopefully Oulton is a fantastic race weekend. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see how we get on with it. I just want to say, this little show I'm going to dedicate to Michael, Crees and Jodie and their family with what happened to them last weekend. I think everybody will agree with me with that. I think that's a nice thing to do. So yes, guys, we're all thinking about you. Let's go for Oulton and Creasy. Let's do the business for your family, mate. Have a good one.